We'll just wait for 2 more minutes.
Yes.
People are joining back. Like, quickly, it's increasing in numbers, so we'll just wait. So.
Friends, please mute your mic because we keep muting and you are unmuting it. When the question and answer comes, then you can unmute and ask one by one. It's when he is having this session, he's lots of noises are coming. Please take care of it. Thank you. Vikrant, 75 plus are there. I think we can go ahead.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead. Yeah. So coming back, so I was about to discuss about one of the most important areas as psychologists that we must follow, because one of our right hand or one of the best aspects that as a psychologist we all have is tools. So we all have a lot of tools that we can use. We are good. We utilize the tools to understand the persons in a much better way. So there has been a lot of discussions going on who can be a better person to administer certain kind of tools. So when we are talking about these kind of tools and assessments that can happen, I have seen a lot of advertisements going on. I can using the fingerprint, I can tell the level of intelligence that your son is possessing, and parents are inquisitive about what is happening with their children. So they need to know more about their child, and they need to venture into these kind of aspects, and they fall into these kind of traps very easily. And when it comes to assessments, one of the most important points they talk about assessments in APA is about the concept of who can use an assessment. So for that, let me just show you some small examples before I start the discussion again. So yeah, so you can see that as of now, this is Pearson's website. So this is the Pearson assessment website that I have just took a screenshot of it. So this shows about a particular assessment which is for a Bailey's Infant Neurodevelopmental Screener. So this particular assessment is administered to children for aspects of neurodevelopmental screening. So when it comes, they have very clearly mentioned who are the people who are eligible to use it. You can see, I'll just point it out, just a second. Yeah. So you can see here very clearly they have mentioned qualification level. So who's a person who can purchase this test also is a question, because here, according to Pearson, there are a certain kind of qualification required for you to purchase certain kind of assessments. For example, here, this particular assessment requires you to have a level B of qualification. So yes, there might be questions, what is level A, level B, and level C? I'll just take you there. So level A qualification means there is no special qualification for you to purchase any of these products. So there are around 30 or 33 products in Pearson which doesn't require any kind of special qualification from your side to purchase that particular assessment. But whereas next level, what we had seen before, qualification level B, here the person who's purchasing the test, okay, the test may be purchased by the individual who's either having a master's degree in psychology, education, speech language pathology, occupational therapy, social work, counseling, or in a field closely related to the intended use of the assessment. For example, a person wants to understand, let's say, want to understand the language development of the child. So a speech language pathologist will be allowed to purchase that particular tool. Okay, and a person who requires to understand the problem solving capacity of the individual, a counselor can purchase a tool, a psychologist can purchase a tool. A person who wants to know more about the learning style of an individual, an educational psychologist will be able to purchase that tool. So depending upon the level of the qualification, so if they have master's degree, okay, in these areas, then depending upon the intended use of the assessment, those person can purchase the tools. And also they are very clear that there should be a kind of a formal training that must happen in ethical administration, scoring and interpretation of clinical assessments. I have seen myself, there are certain standard ways. The standardization of administration is given for one particular reason, that if I administer this test to person A today and I am administering to the same person after 10 years in the same particular way that it has been administered right now, the person must get the same score, or else we have done some kind of mistake in our assessment. So today I would have given, let's say there are 5 subtests. So today I would have started with subtest 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 10 years later when I am doing, I might have gone in a other way. So what I would have done is I would have subtest 3 came to 1, 2, 5 and 4. I would have done it in a different way. That might have had an impact on the um, subtest scores. So maybe the tiredness level, everything would have changed. So that is why very clearly most of the tools very clearly say that there is a standard way of uh, going into an assessment, and we have to make sure that we are following that standardized way of administering. So everyone who is administering these kind of tests must have had a formal training in ethical administration, scoring and interpretation of that particular clinical assessment. Coming to the last level of qualification, level C. So here, level C qualification they have mentioned. So when a person wants to purchase a test with a C level qualification, they require high level of expertise in test interpretation and can be purchased by individuals with either they have a licensure or certification to practice in a particular state in a field of related to the purchase. So for example, I have taken an example here. So here they have mentioned Millen's clinical multi-axis inventory. It's a pure and pure clinical personality inventory. So a person who needs to purchase this tool, okay, as you can see here, they have mentioned they require a level C of qualification. That means the person must be licensed to practice in that particular state in order to purchase that particular tool, or at least they should have had a certification by or a fully active membership in a professional organization that require training and experience in that relevant area of assessment. Then they can purchase a tool. So only under these circumstances that a person can be or will be allowed to purchase a test of level C qualification. Not only Pearson, there are various other assessment centers, assessment uh, um, sellers who are there. So these sellers, they also have these kind of qualification levels being mentioned in their uh, website. So they are very clearly telling that only these kind of qualifications are basics for them to purchase a particular tool. So coming back, so when it comes to assessment, it becomes very, very important that we have gained enough expertise, enough experience in training, administering, and interpreting that particular assessment. Because if anyone can, yes, if I give a tool with the instruction, anyone can administer. Yes, everyone would agree with me. Administering a test is not a big thing. But when it comes to interpretation, that is where your experience, your practice, everything comes into a major way. So it becomes very important for you to make sure that we are understanding these 3 areas. We need to know how we are administering, scoring, and interpreting the assessment. So I have told you before, APA is not the only one which we have. So apart from APA, we have the American Psychological Association, we have American Counseling Association who has come up with their own sets of ethical principles. We have British Psychological Society who has come up with their own code of ethics, Australian Psychological Society who has come up with their own code of ethics. Almost every state has, or every country has their own code of ethics to be followed by the individual in order to practice as a psychologist. And most of these um, these associations, their primary focus is on the well-being and the rights of the individual that we are dealing with. We have to make sure anywhere any of these, I'll be giving you the references. You can just click on those links and you can go to those websites, and you can see first and foremost thing is making sure that we are maintaining the integrity of the individual. We have maintaining keeping the well-being of the individual as the first thing. We have to be competent enough to practice and make sure that we are helping that individual to progress in that field. So this is what has been very clearly mentioned by all the associations across in terms of ethics. And when it comes to Indian perspective, there are two organizations which has attempted to come up with a uh, code of ethics. One is IACP, Indian Association for Clinical Psychologists. They have come up with a code of ethics very specific for the practice of clinical psychologists in India, and also National Academy of Psychology. They have also um, attempted to come up with a code of ethics, but that is more general to all the psychologists, very similar to APA. And if you look more clear, more detailedly, both IACP and NAOP or any other organizations code of ethics much resembles APA's code of ethics. So Indian Association has adopted the APA's code of ethics, as I told you before. This is easily available online, so I thought I'll just browse through this for a brief understanding. So this is based on the APA code, and it's very shorter but very similar. So it covers all the similar areas as covered in APA, but it's not as detailed as APA has given. So this includes, first is professional competence and service. Next is referrals. So how to give referral, to whom the referral source, how to communicate to the referral source, everything is mentioned. Collecting opinions from others, consent, client welfare, court testimony, and confidentiality. These are the major aspects that they have taken from APA's code of ethics, and they have adapted it to the Indian scenario. So even NAOP has come up with such aspects, but NAOP's, you can see it's very, very similar to APS and IACP's code of ethics. It's just mentioned in terms of psychologists what they have to do. So coming to trying to answer the next most important thing, why do we need ethics? So this is another important question, because in the beginning itself I had asked you why is ethics important, and some we got answers like ethics is left up to the individual. But it is not, according to me, it is not left only to the individual, because yes, we can be psychologists, we can have different methods of practices and different ways in which we are practicing, but when it comes to the patient's well-being, ethics has to be followed. Ethics is important. We need certain governing rules and regulations where we have to make sure we are keeping the client safe. So for anyone who's involved into counseling and therapy, we must make sure that we are providing a safe space for them, and ethics is very important for creating that safe space. Because no when people are following the ethics, when people are adhering to the ethics, they are not going to discuss about another individual in a WhatsApp group. They're not going to tell their name, their problems, what they did. These things are not going to happen. And also, these ethics have to be followed when we are walking the legal line. When we are walking the legal line, we have to tell to the legal authorities what is happening. When we are walking the legal line during their psychotherapeutic intervention interaction, especially with these vulnerable clients. These clients are always vulnerable. We need to very clearly remember this. In whoever comes, they are very vulnerable. We have to make sure we are protecting their vulnerability. So for that, we need ethics. And moreover, during these interactions as a therapist, we need some kind of ethical compass, something which shows, oh, no, don't do this. This is not the way you're going to do. You're not competent enough to handle this case. You have to refer them to other person. Even if you have not got any clients in the last few days, if they are not belonging to your area of competence, it is your utmost responsibility to refer them back to someone who can handle them properly. Because if you are not, then we are going to destroy the well-being of the individual. We are not simply competent enough to handle those individuals. So during these interventions, we have to during these interactions, as a therapist or a counselor, we need to have some kind of ethical compass that guides us. So for that, we need ethics. Next is talking about the client's safety and well-being, which is utmost of importance for all of us. So whenever we are talking about the client, it is therapy sessions or counseling sessions or any simple thing that we are doing, it is very, very, very important that we are maintaining the client's safety and well-being. And in this small human encounter that we are having with these vulnerable people, so which often happens behind closed doors, it is not happening in a public place, it happens within the confinement of the small room within the four walls. So we have to make sure that we are maintaining that ethics. And also ethical frameworks are interpreted and implemented within professional and cultural context. We need to look into the cultural aspects. So certain things in Indian culture might be different, in your professional area might be different. So we need to look into all those aspects, and then we have to make sure. For that, we need standard ethics to be implemented. In India, sadly, people are less aware of their own rights. Actually, this is a right of an individual to ask why you're doing harm to me. So even when it is a medical case, we generally are aware of those rights, because psychology is a budding field in India even today. We are still, people are not aware about the rights, and most of them come from diverse socioeconomic and subcultural contexts. So these things makes them more and more vulnerable. And as we can see, training in ethics for mental health professional is very much inconsistent. That is why I had asked you the third question. So how many of you have had ethics as a part of your syllabus? Because I have seen many people not understanding the need for ethics, because first of all, the person who has taught them ethics is not convinced about ethics, and they are not able to make sure that they are convincing their students about what is the need of ethics. So we have to make sure that in India, whenever we are talking about mental health professionals, psychologists, counselors, we have to make sure we are having a consistent pattern of teaching them about ethics. Uh, and often these ethics training are very inadequate, where it is just one part of the whole unit or one part of the whole syllabus. It's just one small topic, one word mentioned in a corner of a page: ethics, ethics to be followed, APA's ethics, ACA's ethics. That's all I have seen in most of the syllabus. So it is inadequate, or sometimes I have not even seen that word being present there. And also, we have to make sure that the levels of accountability that the person is having as a counselor, as a psychologist that we have trained, we have to create that accountability in helping professionals. That is actually in Indian scenario is very, very low according to a lot of researchers. So with the pressure to increase human resources, that is what is happening, because we know the amount of population and we know the amount of mental health problems that are happening across India, and we know the amount of recognized and qualified people who are there to help them. So with just that pressure to increase the human resources and reduce the mental health inequalities in the country, there have been a closer examination of professional training competencies and practical issues that we are facing in this particular field. So in order to increase our ethical competency, I have just one small thing, last topic. It is ethical competency. Ethical competency is where, as an individual, I am aware I have the knowledge and understanding of the ethical codes that is being present or that has been prescribed by my particular organization, and my ability to recognize, analyze the situation, and moreover resolve those ethical situations, and to understand oneself as being responsible for one's own action. Because as a psychologist, we intervene into other person's life, so we have to make sure that we understand ourselves as being responsible for our own actions. That becomes the cornerstone of professional development in any of these helping professions. And we all today, we need to make sure that we are increasing the ethical competency of each and every one, as either ourselves or our students. As a teachers, we have to make sure we are increasing the ethical competency of the students. That becomes our moral responsibility. So with this, I would like to stop talking. And these are some of the resources. You can go through these. These are case studies. In fact, these two are case studies that I have mentioned. It's both are given from a foreign perspective about what are the ethical violations that has happened and how to solve those ethical dilemmas has been very beautifully discussed in these two articles. And these are some of the references. The first one is a very brilliant book which talks about ethical issues in counseling and psychotherapy practice in terms of Indian scenario. Very beautifully, these professors have discussed about variety of issues and other codes for your understanding. So I'm sure Dr. Suresh will be sending across the PPT for your benefit. Thank you.
And you are very clear.
Yeah. So open for questions. If you have any questions.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes, sir.
There are quite a number of portals or people who are offering aggregated courses.
Okay.
Are they actually valid? Because like you told, without a proper PG, at least in MSc Psychology,
yes,
you will not be able to have at least psychology, what is counseling and
very
other
true,
aspects.
Sir, very true.
But these aggregated courses.
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing up that point. At least what I have seen in Indian scenario, most of these accredited courses are not very much valid when it comes to practice, because we have a lot of questions coming up. Who gave the licensing? Because they are not licensing body in accordance to the Indian law. So these things becomes a major issue, sir. So yes, as a psychologist, we need to have certain moral grounds on which we are going to allow them. There are certain courses which are permitted. In terms of using it with children's and other aspects. So in those conditions, yes, it is very much valid. And also there are certain accredited courses which talks about supervision, supervising counselors or psychotherapists. Those kind of programs are also very much important and valid in Indian scenario.
I just wanted to continue with that supervision thing which you have said.
Yes,
it's very unfortunate, even at the practicing level, there is no competence.
Very true, very true. That is one of the major problems.
They're not updating themselves, by attending any training program.
Yes.
Wherever is possible, wherever you little thing you attend, you gain some knowledge. Even that is not happening. And without that, they also want to go in for supervision. Then, they have see, the disheartening thing is people are having, I have a certificate.
Okay.
I have the certificate. I'm the supervisor. I'm the trainers. It is very disheartening. See, whether you are, what I'm saying, whether you are having certificate or not, at least get trained, gain skills, and help the people. We are the healed helpers, and we are the helpers. So we need to be skilled. Without skill, if we do that, we are going to cause more damage to the client rather than helping them.
Yeah.
So this is a very
So yes, sir. As you are told, skill is very important. But apart from skill, sometimes there are certain things we need to do. So skills alone doesn't make them a good psychologist, because we have seen it in many places. Many people might have good skills, but they won't turn out to be a good psychologist. So there is skills are a part, but we have to make sure that we are having certain kind of competence by either completing a particular course or by making sure we are having enough practice. Everything becomes important.
Yeah.
So hello, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I am good, ma'am. How are you?
Nice to meet you through this.
Yes, same here.
Yes. I'm very happy to listen this topic itself. The per se, the topic really is very fascinating because ethics is one of the very important component I would look into. As counselors, psychologists, we all call, and there are a lot of, gap between psychologists, counselors, they call themselves, and then clinical setup, clinical psychologists. We know this. This is going on as the debate is going on.
Yeah.
I agree with really agree with the point of they need to be well trained for assessment, and also in case of counseling also I could see that a lot of people come out with short term courses like they will do only the certification for CBT.
Very true.
And they started calling themselves as psychotherapists.
Yes.
There are people who complete various kuti therapy courses, and they may have an UG in psychology. I don't deny that, but I don't think so. It itself helps them to call themselves a psychotherapist. One require in strong understanding, and they don't refer the cases in that if it is the clinical symptoms. They don't know differential diagnosis and other things. If it is in the case, and I'll tell you very openly, I'm not very comfortable with clinical cases. Means I know the symptoms, but I will definitely will never go into an assessment or anything because I know my limitations.
Yes.
I will definitely refer to an clinical psychologist or an psychiatrist if it is needed.
Yes.
That kind of codes of contact, there is no this monitoring system. I could see that it's a very great flaw we can see in Indian scenario.
Yes.
And in case of even clinical psychologists, I have a lot of disheartening things are also happening. They are also very closed. They open for some of the practices like EMDR. They open it for medical and psychiatry social work students, not for the psychology students who are doing entire core in psychology. They are aware of the assessments and other things. But I don't know what is the regulation could happen for all this. In Indian scenario, I feel it is a long gap. The pipeline is even beyond Delhi. It is not even laid.
True, ma'am. So we don't have enough guidelines, or we don't have enough things to say that this is where the competence for this particular person. That is something which even I have been talking about in a lot of places, a lot of forums, but still we are not able to get a particular answer for that problem that you have raised right now. That is very true. And in fact, as you had told, I had an opportunity. It's a very funny incident. How you, as you told, he's a person who did his bachelor's in BCom and completed his MBA, and he did a 1-year diploma program. That to outside, like not a regular course on he just did that a distance education course, and he calls himself to be a counselor, and that is his secondary profession. His primary profession is he's a businessman. He's running a hotel. So accidentally, when I went to his hotel, I was talking to him. I found him to be Tamu. We just started discussing. That is how I ended up finding. I do counseling myself as well. I'm a counselor. And
all of them will say that I am the counselor.
Yes. Everyone uses the term psychotherapist, the counselor. Everything has been abused. Those terms are literally abused in India. Yes. It's something.
Marketers are counselors nowadays.
Yes.
And I could see that a lot of there are one girl, the online courses. Oh my God, that is even in havoc now.
Very true.
So there is a girl. She really wants to pursue psychology in future. She is a cross major. Let me tell you that she has done her engineering. The very point that she has realized after joining 1 year of engineering, she thinks that she is a human kind of and people oriented. So she would like to shift herself. So she was looking for browsing, and I did REBT, and I did CBT, and I did NLP, all these short-term courses. What else I should equip myself to become a psychologist? She's asking. She wants to pursue psychology. So this is a kind of we don't have such a monitoring system at all. So we require a body to actually regulate this to talk about that. And people who are actually practicing Tani Manida Olukam, we say in Tamil, no? So everybody has to follow this code of contacts and
Yes.
code of ethics.
Ethics.
It's my role. Is it my responsibility? Is it my right? Limitation is this, then layer line. That we
Very
should
true.
not go beyond that line. It should
Yes.
be there within us. I don't think so. There is a governing body required for us if we
Correct.
practice this.
Correct. And that is one way, one small way I usually do is I draw a flow chart. I have a flow chart with myself. So is this case belonging to my particular area of expertise? Will I be the person who will be able to help this individual? If it is a no, I'm going to refer them back to a person who I think can help them. I have got so many referrals from other people who have referred back to my friends because I personally feel that I'm not competent enough to handle those cases. It is that moral compass within me that helps me to make sure that I am going on a right track. I'm not destroying any person's well-being.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I am Madhvi, counseling psychologist, MSc in psychology, PG diploma in child psychology, PG diploma in family and marriage counseling, and pursuing my B.Ed special education in third semester.
Okay, ma'am.
And had done a certification course from DAP also for special education.
Okay.
So my concern is, sir, career counseling is not happening at the correct level.
Yes.
When when the students are interested into getting in psychology, so they are just completing their intermediate or they want to rush for psychology. There are only few colleges where they offer psychology as one of the optionals, and then later on, if they get into any of the graduate for MSc or MA, they are going for
Ma'am, we are not able to hear you clearly.
And later on, which area they have to take, which area adolescent.
Yeah. Sorry,
is it child?
I was not able
is
to
it
hear
child
you clearly.
or is it adolescent? Okay, fine, sir. I will type, sir.
Yes. Yeah, please.
Shall I type?
Please. Yes, ma'am. Please type. Meanwhile, I would also like to.
Sir,
yeah.
Can I ask, sir? Can MPhil clinical psychologists they can call themselves as doctors?
No, ma'am. In a professional sense, no. They can't be called as a doctor. They are clinical psychologists.
Yeah, it will be like you're in front of your name, Mr. So and
yes,
so.
yes,
Yeah,
very
right?
much, very much,
Yes.
very much.
It
But
is
we'll
not
have
doctor so and so.
No. But
unless
we'll have
you get a PhD.
Until we get a PhD. That too, it's a doctorate in philosophy. That doctorate and this MBBS doctors, they are different. They're completely different.
Yes.
And moreover,
yes.
the training happens in a very much a medical setting when it comes to MPhil clinical psychology. So 2 years of posting in a hospital with patients with a complete understanding of DSM-5, ICD-10. That is how the training happens in MPhil programs. So, but they can't be still called a doctor, even though they are trained on par with an MD student.
Yes.
Yeah, and
but many people in Hyderabad, they call themselves as doctors.
Okay.
Clinical psychologists. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I
Okay.
have
Hi, Vikrant.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Manika from Bangalore.
Yeah.
And hi. So I've been listening to the whole session. There seems to be a thread that runs through the whole thing, especially in the Indian context, where we associate our degrees with the pride that we know something and the knowledge of we have. So with the knowledge I have, I can do things which I know I can do because I'm a psychologist. So this narrative around psychology or a clinical psychologist or the way the people have associated the degrees have been the root cause for abusing and not having any boundaries. That is one observation I want to make. So maybe changing the narrative and not glamorizing the whole aspect of clinical psychologists because they can do assessments, they know about human mind and blah blah blah. So that thing is strongly, I think, somewhere in our Indian culture, we have got it, because ethics basically had been a thing that has come from the Western individualistic societies, whereas here we are more collectivistic in nature. So also taking that into consideration and de-glamorizing the whole thing, yeah, I'm thinking in those terms. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes,
very
yeah.
very valid point that you have brought out here. It is actually that is what is causing the problem, as you had very clearly pointed out. Because as a person, I don't see a counseling psychologist or as an industrial psychologist or a child psychologist or an educational psychologist below me because I completed a particular course. It is never to be that way as well. So when we are talking from a psychological perspective, every field is equal. Every field is on par with each other. It is just as you have very clearly put out how it has been glamorized. And moreover, the legal consideration or the legal attachment that has come up with a few courses has made it more recognized among the people than others. That is what is creating an insecurity in the people to make sure that they are falling into that line as well. Before we take any more questions, we have a lot of questions that has been asked on the chat. I would like to answer those questions. So, yeah. Is one of the questions for sir, do you think it is possible to follow ethical principles in online and telecounseling? A very brilliant question. Given at this junction, when we are undergoing COVID, there are a lot of online counselings and telecounselings that are happening. And right now, I have completed a course on telepsychology from APA. So where we have been discussing one whole session on ethics. There are separate ethics, and you can refer to telepsychology ethics in APA's website for you to get more answer to what are the ethical principles that we need to follow there. It is very much it is there and it is available and we can follow it. And second question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we are running short of time. One question which has been already been asked by ma'am. Yeah, Madhavi ma'am, I mean to say after MSc whether they have to land in counseling, child, family, and career counseling. Ma'am, I'm not sure your question is very clear here. If you can.
Sir,
you can.
I meant to say once they have done the counseling MSc psychology, then which area they have to choose? Like there will be a confusion. Which areas of expertise they have, whether it is child or adolescent or family or marriage or what
it is left up to the individual, ma'am. It is left up to them where they feel they are more competent, where they feel they can handle a particular case. That is where they have to go.
Do you think that with only MSc you can deal with the child psychology also?
That is a very difficult question. Yes, you can't. You can't. But
because
if they feel, no, if they feel, actually we are running short of time. If Suresh sir, if Suresh sir agrees, we can discuss further more in the next session.
And send the questions. I will forward to him. I will take this minute to record.
Yes.
Gratitude to my friend, the clinical psychologist, Ukran Babu. I thank you on behalf of the Department of Psychology, on behalf of the participants over here, for accepting our invitation and sharing your valuable inputs. And this is the topic need of the hour. Thank you so much, sir, for